Fisa,
Hey
how are
Chad,
you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Excited to be here with you for, I think this is our second installment of Lively Conversations. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Well, I'm pretty excited for this. I hope you are too. I guess for starters, my name's Chad Benoit. I am part of our broker strategy team here, and I'm thrilled to be flanked by the lovely Nafisa Mazumdar, our product marketing specialist here at Lively. And we're talking about a pretty important topic, change management, right? Something that kind of frequently comes up this type of year. But yeah, I'm excited to do this with you and kind of just get things kicked off with another lively conversation.
That sounds great. We have an exciting time of year coming up with open enrollment.
Yeah. And I feel like, this is something that although we work with groups that are transitioning throughout the course of any year, right? I think you and I could both appreciate that the bulk of our business comes across ahead of 1/1 because that's kind of the most common um, renewal date for health plans, right? So we're going to be thinking about this issue of change management more so now as we lead into like that open enrollment season. So I think it's super top of mind for a lot of people. And I mean, I have to imagine that from a marketing perspective, it's sort of the same line of thinking, right?
Yep, exactly. I think just across the board, when you think about trying to get people to feel comfortable with their benefits and then also adopting their benefits, there's multiple layers that go into it. And really, from a marketing perspective, it's just one piece of the whole pie, but it is a pretty
Yeah.
significant piece.
Yeah. And I think we hear the same thing from brokers, right? Brokers that are representing those clients. But I think where maybe sort of our level of understanding when it comes to the end user of these types of products, right? The employee. I don't think like for me, I don't have a ton of insights there. So I think one of the things that I'm curious about, right, is when those employees, when those members kind of catch wind of, oh, we might be going to a new vendor, there's uncertainty there, right? And maybe some sort of hesitancy towards the adoption of those things. So when you think about the benefit teams preparing those folks for those transitions, like what are some of the things that come to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really great question. I think that, let's take a step back because obviously there's the benefits teams that are clearly sort of the glue that's holding everything together. But when we kind of really think about what we're having to do for employees in that moment, it's really building that trust with them. And obviously, trust is earned and not given. And so we want this so that the change is feeling organized, it's feeling somewhat predictable, as predictable as we could possibly make it, and also support it for them. I think that fundamentally just requires a certain level of proactive action and planning that's actually demonstrating to employees like you do have your stuff together. And so obviously it's kind of like the HR team has some of that responsibility, but I also firmly believe that the providers that you're working with also have a big responsibility to do that. Um, Based on research that we've actually done at Lively, we found that there isn't necessarily like one clear party that employees are going to all the time. I mean,
Right.
they're very frequently going to the employers themselves or the HR teams, but at the same time, they're looking to their providers for more specialized support. And that's what we kind of have to think about as well, is that the provider themselves and then the HR teams have to be working together to understand like here is the exact information that needs to be shared with employees. It needs to be consistent across the board. So I think in that way, it is that the provider should be proactively asking HR teams what are your goals, especially going into this open enrollment? What are maybe some of the key changes that we need to capture? But then also being able to give you resources that help you capture those changes in ways that would resonate with all different types of employees. Um,
Yeah.
so for example, here at Lively, like as part of our standard change management, we have things like PDFs, we have like more modular messaging and copy, but at the same time, like we recognize that there's certain like demographics of employees who might prefer videos. So being able to take all of that information and really packaging it up in a way that's resonating with them, and again, having make sure it's being like consistent across the board, I think is what kind of helps build trust. You're meeting your employees pretty much where they are. And
Yeah.
you're also giving HR teams the tools that kind of really fit in with their existing technology. For example, we found that benefits teams really love their intranets and wikis. So providers should be giving you sort of stuff that you can just take and plug and play just to make that as easy as possible. So all of
Yeah.
that to say that I think that it's a delicate dance between the provider themselves and also the HR team, but really the provider should be kind of taking that proactive approach. And then I would also encourage HR teams just to make their expectations really clear to their provider too, because more than likely, they'll be able to come up with a comp strategy that works for everybody and maybe
Yeah.
help in some of that anxiety.
Yeah. And it's interesting just hearing you talk about the layers here of change management. To me, it's like it's one of those broad sort of industry terms that they can mean a lot of different things, right? But to your point, I think that it's really focusing on helping those HR teams with these transitions. I think in our space, what we see frequently, Nafisa, is there's there's not a lot of customization that a lot of these partners are willing to do because they sort of have a it's like a one size fits all kind of plan for change management, which I think to us at Lively, it's like, okay, wait, that shouldn't really be a thing because every single client is so different, right? So to me, I know that when talking to brokers, they don't want just this plug and play. Here's a couple of pieces of literature, pass these out to your employees, and they should be good to go. I think to me, the things like the proactive ongoing education are such a big element here because it sort of gives that client not just an upfront solution to kind of helping their employees, but an ongoing plan that should be dynamic and adaptable, but kind of really lets them know, all right, Lively kind of understands this has to be sort of this malleable type of offering, right? Because again, things change, the way employees look at these things change, and I think there needs to be this level of flexibility with these plans. But like, kind of, what are your thoughts there when it comes to that sort of aspect of being a little bit more, kind of go with the flow as a partner in allowing that input from those client teams to help you build something together?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is super important. And I also think that that's kind of why, in a way, it seems counterintuitive, right? But having like a standard package of different types of media that you're providing the HR teams is really important. But another approach that we do take here at Lively is that in addition to any of the standard materials that we do have, we kind of take a look at, okay, where are employees engaging with their benefits? We usually get this information from the HR teams themselves. Like, are they typically going to benefit fairs? Are they like big readers of the email newsletter? Do they prefer like short form video content? And so that's also stuff that we do offer at Lively, where we try to figure out like what have you seen work well in the past. So we're kind of taking that historical data and we're almost testing out the communications approach with the partner. And really kind of figuring out like, okay, is this going to work well going into the next year? And then that also helps us learn and then keep continually adapting our approach. So I think it's very important to your point for it to be like a customized approach because not one client is going to be the same as the other. And then what one employee base is receptive to is not what the other employee base is going to be receptive to. So in that
Right.
way, it's kind of like there is a certain level of testing involved. And that's why we do allow for customization options at Lively for our enterprise customers. Um, it really helps us make sure that they're actually meeting their goals as opposed to giving them this sort of cookie cutter package and expecting them to run with it when it really doesn't speak to their circumstance. It doesn't speak to their plan design. And that's something that we're very cognizant of is just making sure that it reads like something that would make sense to the employee at that company, as opposed to something that might just one off make sense to the HR person.
Yeah. And I think even like layered below that, I think about things like how, I mean, just the demographic of a set of employees, because I think, you look at a lot of these larger organizations, especially, and just given their sheer size,
Yep.
there's going to be, I mean, sometimes there could be three different generations represented within one organization, right? And you have to think about everything from how everybody learns differently and absorbs information differently to what they actually prefer in terms of the frequency of communications and not feeling like they're overwhelmed. So within that, right? I think that part of that becomes, all right, what is the timing of the messaging, and how do we make sure that it's super digestible for the potentially like multitudes of different generations that are ingesting this type of information? So like what do we look at Lively to really make sure that the timing is great, it's very clear, it's digestible, and it gives them like a really clear path to learning about us as a new benefits provider?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really great question when we kind of think about how different people are consuming different types of media. You know, well, first of all, let me take a step back, Chad. Actually, it's not just three generations, it's four generations that are represented in the workforce at a time, which is a little bit crazy, but you can see kind of
Yeah,
how there might be such a spread in people's preferences there. Boomers might prefer maybe just like straightforward written fast facts, maybe on a PDF, like just give me like the top details and really that's it. Whereas when you kind of think about a generation on the other end of the spectrum, which is Gen Z, they're really expecting more mobile first interactive content, like ideally inside a native app.
right.
That does make a difference, being within like your Safari or Google Chrome browser versus being in an app and knowing that that's kind of the place where you're getting all of that information. It is interesting though, across the board, everybody is watching more video, regardless of their generation. So in that way, it's almost interesting that we need to sort of blend formats to then meet the people exactly where they are and where they're consuming that information. Um, so for example, if you're taking a look at a group like Gen Z who might want that native app experience, when I think about, some of the offerings that we have here at Lively, we have this tool called Lively IQ, which is a decision support tool. And it is essentially like within the Lively app where employees are able to go compare their different health plans. And it's a really interesting experience because the employee is kind of initiating that interaction by themselves, but we are obviously kind of leading them down the path of like, hey, this experience is available to you via email, but then we might be leading them into the app where they're working with these interactive tools, providing their own like demographic information. And it's
Yeah.
almost like the experience is just adapting as it gets more information itself. And then within the experience, we have things like short written content, we have videos themselves. So you can kind of see how there's so many different touch points and so many different communication channels that we're using for different messages across the board. And that's why I think it's important to have a bit of a diverse approach, especially when you're putting together like the types of information that your employee base is going to consume. Um,
Yeah.
so I think in general, it's a matter of just having that diversity, being able to mix and match. And then also in a way, like almost catching employees like a little bit like pleasantly surprised. Like this is information that's available to you in a bite-sized video, whereas maybe, for example, some benefits providers wouldn't be doing something like that.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to call out that the ability to do these things on the mobile device makes a lot of sense to me, just because, and one of the things that I'm constantly talking about when demoing, the Lively dashboard to, however many different employers, groups, and brokers that we're doing this for in a given week, month, year, is that I'm always talking about these are mobile benefits. Like these are benefits that you're accessing through your mobile device. So there's a lot of key elements there where I feel like they should be able to kind of use their phone for those training sort of purposes, right? And these educational purposes, because again, everyone is on their mobile all the time. It's just the way that we ingest information as however many across the four generations, we're all using mobile devices to do a lot of different things, but one of those really important things is access our benefits, right? So that I think that definitely covers the employee experience, right? And what we're going to put in front of them. And but an element there that we haven't really talked about is the leaders of those organizations and how they're presenting information, right? And making sure that there's not just a level of trust that's implied there in the new vendors, but maybe some excitement because maybe those employees are used to the same dinosaur as a benefit provider that they've had for 25 years, right? And then it's going to be oh wow, like this is actually really tech forward depending on who they're going with, and maybe there's some fear there, but there should be excitement. I think it's a delicate balance. Can you talk about how leaders can really effectively navigate those transitions to build excitement and trust with their employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that that's a really great question because when you kind of really think about what fear is and maybe what anxiety is, I heard somebody once essentially tell me that if you just reframe it in a way, it is just excitement. If you reframe the way that, maybe you're presenting that information to yourself or presenting that information to others. And I think that this is kind of where there's such an opportunity for benefits leaders to basically be able to say, like, hey, we're offering you these benefits, and then working with the benefits provider to be able to say that this is a benefit that will genuinely improve the quality of your life. Because when you think about the types of benefits that we work with, they're very deeply personal parts of somebody's life, like their health and money. And to your point, it's kind of like they might be using them in a different capacity, but they might not even know like the best way to use it, like for their particular lifestyle, for their particular financial goals. And so, in a way, it's kind of like being able to have that personalization to show somebody what the potential of, for example, like growing their HSA over time is. I found that a lot of, especially people maybe within like Gen Z and like millennials, like they might at a very surface level know what an HSA is, but it's always so rewarding to be able to see that light bulb moment where it's kind of like, this can work in so many different ways for me, and I just had no idea this entire time. And so I think for benefits leaders in that particular way, like really just think about the fact that you are offering a benefit that is fundamentally going to help somebody achieve a certain financial goal. And you should frame it as such, and you should be able to kind of put in personalization from your own personal touch because you understand your employee base, but your provider should also, in some capacity or the other, really be using technology. Because when you think about what technology like AI has the capability to do, it's essentially like personalizing the experience even more to the individual account holder, like as they're going along in the experience, as opposed to kind of having to say, like, we're just going to offer everything up front and that's pretty much it. Um, so I think it really is a matter of just reframing it and making sure that people know what these benefits are for. And again, it's not just the HR team's responsibility. The provider should kind of have that built into the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some really great points there. I think we hit on a lot of really important elements of the change management when it comes to making these transitions. So thank you, Nafisa. This has been really fun. Again, some really great points there. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We appreciate you listening, tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another lively conversation. Thanks,
Back.
Nafisa.
Thank you. Bye.